And welcome to this installment of the Postal Points webinar series. Today we're talking about the content of the issue that came out last Monday. We're kind of close to that. We're not on our usual schedule here, I realize. But we're also going to have some acknowledgement and conversation about the events that have almost overwhelmed what we talked about just 3-4 days ago. Of course, the issue, as you can see on the front page, talks about the governor's decision that was made earlier in the month concerning a deferral of a decision on the exigency issue. This is something which we in the industry have been waiting for a number of months. We knew it was on its way. We knew there was a looming decision, and it was just a matter of waiting to see whether or not they're going to actually pull the trigger. The weeks and days before that statement and since were filled with a lot of anxiety in the industry, a lot of conversations between the Postal Service, industry associations, including us, different coalitions, and even the unions in the Postal Service. We even had a sit-down with the Postmaster General and the Deputy and some of the key unions and the Mailers Associations. We all sat around the table and said, what can we agree upon to avoid the governor seeing no way out of the circumstance they're in financially other than pulling the trigger on exigency? That was something which preceded the September 5th statement. They did postpone the decision until the end of the month, and as we now know, with the benefit of subsequent knowledge, they did in fact choose to file for exigency. They announced it yesterday and will submit the paperwork today. They have not done so as yet. But the issues essentially remain the same. This is not something which anyone in the industry, of course, and not even in the Postal Service, I don't think, takes lightly. It isn't simply an issue of grabbing for some money because they don't want to bother doing anything else. As you know, Congress has been notoriously ineffective in getting anything done. They have two bills in Congress, one in each chamber, which are very, very different. Both, as of today, have been exposed to discussion and hearings, but neither has gone any place beyond that. So seeing nothing coming down the pipe to help them out in any other way, and seeing some of the cost reduction issues and revenue opportunity issues being blocked in different ways, the governors felt they had no alternative but to go to the well and ask for an exit rate increase. Without tipping off too much, I think it's safe to say that, as I indicated in the blurb I sent out yesterday, and as you'll read more about in the next issue, they're quite aware of the fact that this is something that they're doing, and rather in doing so, they're risking future volume, future revenue. So they were quite clear to say that if Congress does act, they would be open to the idea of pulling back on at least that portion of the rate increase that represents exigency. But absent that, of course, they have to have some money to keep the lights on, keep things going. The one thing that's a consensus amongst most of the parties is this idea of the FERS overpayment. That's about, depending who you ask, $3 to $13 billion that's been overpaid, and FERS being one of the retirement systems, of course, the newer of the two retirement systems in which postal employees are enrolled, and the other one being the idea of some sort of health care reform that would let the Postal Service lower its costs and get about $8 billion back into its pocket if that could be done. But of course, those are things that are still speculative. Nothing's been done, as I said. So until something is done, the governors felt they had no choice. You've got 4 pages there of summary from the testimony that was presented at the Senate hearing last Thursday. There was one that just literally got finished at 1 o'clock as I walked in here for this webinar. So it's been a 2-part hearing, if you will, by the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee on the bill that was co-authored by Senators Carper and Coburn. As you can pretty much get by looking at the comments, the highlights of the comments, there was nothing new said. The people who were party to the hearing, who were present at the hearing, in this case, the PMG, chairman of the PRC, the IG from the Postal Service, as well as a couple of union folks, all of them pretty much restated the cases they've stated in the past. Pat went back to explaining the issues that he feels are important to get the Postal Service back on an even keel. Chairman Galway, of course, made sure everybody knew what a fine job her commission's doing. IG Williams talked about some of the background issues to do with the Postal Service's business situation. He repeated his contention that there is less, the term is elasticity, there is less price sensitivity, I guess is a better word, in mail than many of us believe there is, but that they seem to feel that's the case. The union came out, the two of them came out, especially the clerks union, very negative on many of the things in the bill. They never want to do anything that might endanger any of their member benefits. It's just somehow or other driving the Postal Service to the brink is going to not endanger them. They also are in favor of, measures that would eventually remove the cap on postal rates. They believe that somehow or other removing the cap is going to let the Postal Service make more money, take the pressure off, the downward pressure on wages, take the pressure off the need to reduce costs by closing facilities, and thereby help the interests of the union and its members. But again, from our perspective, doing something which perpetuates costs or which hurts the Postal Service's ability to do business, that hurts the attractiveness of mail in the long term, is not going to be something good for the Postal Service, nor for the members of the unions that are employed by it. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea what happened during the hearing. As I said, you can read through the whole thing and get the details. And today we had another hearing talking about, today's hearing talked a lot about the health care issues. There was a lot of discussion back and forth about whose numbers are good, whose numbers are right and wrong. But it was said more than once that the way that the OPM folks are arguing against the removal of the Postal Service's employees and retirees from that pool, that the reason they don't want to do it is because of how it would adversely impact the costs that would have to be borne by the remaining federal employees who stayed in the pool. So a couple of people on the panel, a couple of senators, realized what they're saying in so many words is that the Postal Service's employees and retirees, many of whose costs we are paying through postage, are being kept in the federal system in order to subsidize, if you will, the rates paid by other members of the federal employee pool. And there was no way to refute that. So with that little bulb now lit in the heads of some legislators, perhaps there's a better opportunity or better chance that something will be done to enable the Postal Service to separate from that pool and establish, inside or outside the federal programs, its own set of retirement or health care offerings. But again, that's all part of today's conversation, and we're a long ways from being able to see this implemented because of legislation that's been enacted. On other issues other topics we talked about in this issue, we hit the issue of the intelligent mail parcel barcode and buy-for. Now, the buy-for issue has been one of sensitivity for many of our members because of concerns that the Postal Service would take the information they gather off postage statements and use it to market to the mailing service providers' customers in ways that would be adverse to the interests of those providers. We've been down this road before. We've talked about it many, many times, and the Postal Service is keenly aware of those sensitivities and has been repeatedly assuring us that whatever there is that's feared is not going to happen. And if we've had instances where there have been people crossing the line, from all indications we've ever had, when those are reported, they're corrected quickly. In this case here, we're talking about parcel mailers. So if you have buy-for information about parcels, you are not just revealing information to the Postal Service, but you're revealing information to a competitor of this provider who could be already serving the customer whose pieces are represented there. So by telling the Postal Service that you're mailing the consolidator, for example, is carrying parcels for Nordstrom's, for Target, whoever, they are in a sense revealing to the Postal Service the existence of a potential customer for their own package services. So, unfortunately, the Postal Service has been very dismissive of this. They have not been appropriately sensitive to these concerns on the part of parcel shippers that I believe are different from and much more serious than those of letter and flat mailers. And as a result, our friends here at Postcom down the hall from us sent a letter to the Postal Service's General Counsel, an excerpt from which you see in the issue. But I think, one of the more pointed comments that was made is the second highlight, where it says that where the Postcom's lawyer tells the Postal Service lawyer, when dealing with proprietary information such as customer lists, the Postal Service should not attempt to speak for mailers. In other words, it's inappropriate for the Postal Service to assume it knows what what its customers think, want, need, and more appropriate for them to take the word of those customers when they express for their own part what's important and what's of concern. So this, again, is an ongoing story, and we'll keep you apprised of what's going on. And when we see a response to Postcom's letter, we'll make sure to keep you informed. Interesting little situation here on the next page, when out of the blue, just John Q. Public, some individual, a one-named individual like Madonna or Cher or Prince, sent in a suggestion to the Postal Service for a new product. And it was pretty well written up. If you want to go take the trouble to go read about it on the Postal Regulatory Commission's website, you can. But it was well written up, and it essentially presented an interesting idea for a service under which addressees could have like a blind mailbox that could not be that would not reveal to senders the location of the recipient. So if you, for example, did not want to have certain things sent to certain places, you could have a number of these private addresses in existence, each of which would be supplied to various senders, and the Postal Service, who would manage this service, would translate this generic coded address you'd have into the true delivery address for the pieces involved. So that if you had a package coming from Target, for some reason I always pick Target, I don't know why, and it was sent through one of these blind addresses, you may have it sent to your home. Whereas if you had advertising mail, they would hopefully use a different blind address or private address and forward those things to a P.O. box, for example, that you may have. It's an interesting idea. I don't know how the Postal Service is going to react to it. They may say it wasn't invented here, therefore it's no good. I don't know. But the Commission sent it over to the USPS and asked them to get back to them within 4 weeks, and that would put it somewhere towards late October. So we'll see what happens with this. It could become a service that they offer. It may not. Who knows where it's going to go? But I thought it was an interesting idea. And at this point, if there is some way for the Postal Service to make more money on something, it's worth exploring, even if it's not going to make them multimillionaires. The next thing, of course, is the latest installment in the ongoing Gamefly case. This time, the Postal Regulatory Commission did what they threatened to do and issued an order saying by the end of this month, which is Monday, the Postal Service must implement certain types of rate adjustments to end the discrimination against various types of mailers of DVDs and CDs and that type of thing through first-class mail. If you want to go back and read the whole long, sad story of this case, it goes back the better part of a decade and relates to how the DVDs, the CDs, those round discs, optical discs that were sent by Gamefly were handled differently than comparable items mailed by Netflix or Blockbuster, and how different rates were applied to each. The average person can certainly understand why Gamefly felt they were being discriminated against, but for some reason the Postal Service has been fighting this for, as I say, for the better part of a decade. A little bit of research we did shows that actually this is the longest running case that the PRC's ever had. Now this goes back about 4.5 years. The docket number shows that was a 2009 case. So that means it was filed sometime after September 2009. I can't remember what the date was. 2008 rather. So that goes back at least 4 years. And before that, there had been years of conversation, fruitless conversation between the Postal Service and Gamefly about how to settle this before they brought it to the Commission as a complaint. You've had some other cases that ran quite a while. All of them are kind of old cases going back at least 20, 30 years to the earlier days of the Postal Service when much of the rate classification schedule and the rate structure is being put together. So the fact that we have this now, 4 decades or so later than the start of the Postal Service indicates that this is one of those things that has really been a bear for them to work out, for the PRC as well as the other parties to work through. The next thing is the latest installment in the APWU's efforts to stop the consolidations. Today's hearings, of course, that came up. It was not the focus of the hearings today, but when the unions were on the second panel of today's hearings, when they were on the panel of last week's hearings, they always bring up how the Postal Service is destroying the system because they're closing plants. As we've talked about before, as I hope you realize, the reason this process is underway is because there are simply too many plants. You don't need to have the network you had if you're going to, number one, handle 25% less product, and number two, no longer try to get things turned around overnight. So with those two conditions in place, the need to have as many plants as there were is gone. Just the same, for its own purposes, the union is trying to block those consolidations. In this case, is going back and saying that the Postal Service is failing to follow service standards. This is like the third bite of the apple they're trying to make in this issue. They've tried to claim that they didn't use current statistics, and a variety of other things that they have not been successful in using to prosecute the case. As you can see, the examples shown, in this place there was I love this, a magazine called Sports Illustrated. They must have never heard of it before, but this thing called Sports Illustrated was late, and someplace else there's a parcel that was late, and someplace else the newspaper is late. And whether or not the Commission is going to look at this and say there's a nationwide problem with the Postal Service's implementation of consolidations is another matter, but I don't see the evidence here to say that service standards are collapsing. The Commission itself regularly gets briefings from the Postal Service, and they bring over their monthly and even more frequent for that matter, but monthly and quarterly service standard service reports that shows that ever since the first part of the year, when the volume of IMB mail really became significant, service performance has, without any BS, really improved. And they can show it with statistics that are based upon not just EXFC, but upon the movement of IMB mail, letters and flats, regardless of class, through the mail stream. And it's not always going to be perfect, but it is always within a certain range of the target number. And it has not been what would be suggested by some of these reports from the union. But of course, they're just doing what they got to do to try to stop a glacier here. But I don't think they're going to have an awful lot of luck in doing this. There's a couple of things here talking about changes in headquarters. The point being that what they're doing is two things. They're trying to shed more management employees in the field, postmasters, area and district people. So if you have, I'm sure you do have contacts in the field at various levels, there could be some more absences coming up. You could see more people retiring because of the early out that's being offered. And what's also happening again at the postal headquarters is yet another reshuffling of some of the retail and marketing functions. And they're going through some changes in staffing there as well. So if any of you have contacts at the headquarters level, you may see those begin to move around too. This was kind of a short issue because we were waiting for things to happen, and you can't report much on what's not happening. But as I said before, the rate filing is going to be done today. The Postal Service has a bad habit of waiting until like 5 minutes to 5 before they drop things at the Rate Commission, so I don't know if I'm going to have it today and any time before we all go home in order to let you know what it says. But it's obviously going to be a lengthy document. It's going to have a lot of legal argument about why the exigent provisions apply, about why the 4.3% above the CPI cap is an appropriate figure for them to recoup whatever they believe they've lost for whatever reasons they cite, probably the recession. And I don't know what the numbers are going to look like in any particular rate cell. So don't call me and say, what's the rate going to be for a 3-digit standard mail flat going to Podunk? I don't know. And we probably won't be able to see those and give you anything for some time. My goal is to get out a special bulletin probably early next week that has the rate information at some level for first and standard, and to have a complete set of rate charts in the next issue, which is October 16th. No, we're coming out late that week. It's Thursday, because I'll be out of town for a bit before that. So you'll get all you can get as soon as I can get it out to you, but I can't tell you what I don't know yet because they haven't said anything themselves. So let's see. Michelle, do we have any questions here?
No.
Everybody's asleep out there? Okay, well, you know what I know now, and you know what I don't know, and you know what I'll tell you when I do know it. So other than that, we want to thank our sponsor, AccuZip, for its continued support for the Postal Points webinar series. We want to remind you that the next issue is coming out, as I say, on the, what's the Thursday, 18th, 17th, 18th of October? And I have it right here. If I read my own stuff, it's right here. And that the webinar for that is going to be at the end of the month as well. So yeah, October 16th is the next issue, and the next webinar will be the Monday following that. So until then, again, no questions. Thanks again for calling in today. We'll talk to you next time.